Hello and welcome to the character study. Apologies for the lateness. Technical difficulties. I have not streamed in a very long time. So obviously some hitches are going to be a part of the stream. Anyway, today's character study, we'll be talking everything Transformers. And I've got the number one fan of Transformers that I know of, who's Extrazero. How you doing, Extra?
Hey, I'm doing good. It's Friday here, and yeah, it's been a long week. I just been enjoying the week. Been playing a little bit of the new Zelda, the Echoes of Wisdom game. I played a little bit of that last night. Saw Transformers One last week and really enjoyed it. So yeah, I was really excited to get the opportunity to come back. It's been a while since we've been on a stream together. I think last time um, I forget what was the last video we did on your channel. It was
Hmm.
trying to remember what it was.
Um. Hmm. It might have been a True Pop Culture 7 show we were
I think it was
discussing.
just that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember what we were discussing.
Yeah. But
Oh,
I love any opportunity to talk Transformers. I've relaunched my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/extrazero. And, really, just really love the opportunity to discuss these characters, why they're important to me, their inner workings, what makes them special beyond the gimmick of them being robots that transform into other things. I think the tagline, corny as it may be, more than meets the eye, really applies to these characters and why they're relevant 40 years after they debuted.
yeah. Listen, we'll pick your brain on that because I don't know too much about Transformers, so
Mm-hmm.
I guess before we get started, we will be reviewing Transformers One in this show, so stay tuned for that. And oh, we've got a chat as well.
Yeah, Princeton,
Princeton
Princeton's good
Felix,
beat.
hello, hey, thanks for tuning in. So yeah, stay tuned for Transformers One. Um, but first, I wanted to get into Transformers itself. My first introduction to Transformers were the Michael Bay movies. I'm
For a
born
lot
in
of people, it
2000.
was.
Yeah, and we, where I grew up, we didn't really have Transformer toys,
Mm-hmm.
but we had the next best thing, which was Lego Bionicles.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember me and my siblings just used to pretend that, okay, this one kind of looks like Optimus Prime, so he'll be Optimus Prime. This one will be Megatron and Jazz and all that stuff.
And before they did Bionicle, I forget what the name of it was, but they had a very similar line where Lego tried doing their own Transformers. That was like the predecessor to Bionicle. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what they were called. Um, but
Didn't Mega Bloks do Transformers?
well, they Hasbro did their own. They had a line called Built to Rule that came out during Transformers Armada, which was a couple years, well, several years before the Michael Bay movies. Um, but yeah, they've had unofficial Lego Transformers. Mega Bloks that do it, but now Lego's actually doing Transformers. They finally got the license. They put out a really good Optimus Prime and a questionable Bumblebee. But
Nice. I remember when freaking Lego Spider-Man was such a rarity as well. It was like a one-off of the Raimi Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, but then it was just Mega Bloks everywhere, Mega Bloks. Um,
it was Lego Slicer. Lego Slicer that was the predecessor to Bionicle, and they
wow.
actually could transform. They had gimmicks, and they could. I mean, they didn't look like anything, but they could transform, contorting
Yeah.
their limbs into other shapes.
It, it makes you feel really old when someone says Michael Bay Transformers is
I,
their first. Yes.
I'm with Cell Shade on that because I was 21 years old when
Wow.
yeah,
Damn. I
yeah.
think Transformers. I know the first ever. Mm,
Crap, I was 22 actually.
I'm 24 right now, so.
Mm-hmm.
um, but no, I remember Transformers just being. I don't know how old. 2008, 2009.
Was 2007 was the first Bay movie. 2009 was Revenge of the Fallen. 2011 was Dark of the Moon.
I was.
2014 was Age of Extinction, and I want to say it was 2018 was the last night. I can't remember. No, I think it was
We
2017. It
we
was
don't talk about
2017.
that one. I think
Yeah,
that might be the
the
worst Michael Bay one.
that was the worst movie I've ever seen in the movie theater. Like I regret seeing that movie, man. It was I felt my takeaway from that movie is even though he got paid, I felt sorry for Anthony Hopkins for that being a blemish on his acting
Oh,
career.
yeah, yeah. But the first Transformer movie, okay, so I must have been 7 years old. Damn it! Wow. Um, and I remember it being like one of the first few movies that I kind of consistently watched. I remember the first movie I ever watched in cinemas was Surfs Up, about penguins surfing. That I remember well.
You know
But
who directed that? Oh wait, no, that wasn't. That,
what?
I'm thinking of Happy Feet.
Oh, Ron
George
Howard.
George Miller directed
George
Happy Feet.
Miller, yeah. Oh,
Uh,
not Ron Howard. Okay. Didn't he say he'd rather commit seppuku than make another one, or something to that akin? I'm not gonna say the
it
S
made him
word on
money.
YouTube, but
It made him
yeah.
money, you know.
That's funny. The Mad Max director doing Happy
Hmm.
Feet. But I just remember being completely fascinated by giant robots fighting, and it was one of the first like big action movies that me and my siblings watch on repeat. And yeah, and we used to play with Bionicles, pretend they're Transformers, but I never really had a good understanding of Transformers. So I wanted to ask you, did Transformers start as comics, or did it start as a toy brand,
Started as a
or
toy brand,
okay?
and it goes back into the 70s. There's a
Hmm.
line called Diaclone in Japan, and Takara Tomy, or I think back then they were just Takara before they merged with Tomy. I think yeah, they definitely were Takara. And there was an odd phenomenon in the 80s when they would import toy lines from overseas and build a cartoon around. Voltron's an interesting one because they actually, funny enough, Voltron was a happy accident because I can't remember if it was Sunbow or not who imported it, but they actually got the wrong anime.
Hmm.
They got Go Lion instead of I want to say it was I think Cell Shade probably will know. I think it was Detalion, and they got it like they wanted an anime with a like they would shop around and like look at action scenes and order it and then chop and dub it and bring the toys in. Transformers was an interesting one because they did their own. They didn't have an existing cartoon, and so Sunbow Productions, which was owned by Marvel, decided to pick up the toy line and they adapted it. And they also brought in other figures. Famously, Shockwave was not made by Takara Tomy. It was actually a Radio Shack toy called Galaxy Man. And they brought in a Macross figure with Skyfire, or the toy was dubbed Jetfire. So it was kind of like this hodgepodge that they brought together, and they had Bob Budiansky, who worked for Marvel. He was the godfather of all the characters, so he was the one that looked at what was in the toy line, what he thought would resonate with kids. He was the one that made the bios and the backstories. Interestingly enough, originally Optimus Prime was going to be Inferno, the fire truck.
Huh.
Yeah, and then they decided now we'll make him the semi. They went with the convoy character and made that Optimus Prime. So yeah, they really were innovative in taking an existing toy line, building something that they thought would resonate with kids, and it did. They were very successful in doing that.
Does that happen a lot? Like, I
Not
can't
now.
think of any franchise that was initially a toy brand and
Well, GI
evolved
Joe.
into a full-on try. Okay,
Yeah, GI Joe
and
was one. Mm-hmm.
that's why they're doing a crossover movie. I'm like, GI Joe and Transformers. What the hell do they have in
Well,
common?
they had a lot in common with there was a lot of crossover in the 80s. Spider-Man actually was part of the Transformers continuity, and there's an interesting character that ties all of like so many franchises together. Death's Head. I don't know if you've ever heard of Death's Head, but he's a Marvel villain. He started off as a Transformers character. He has crossover with GI Joe and the Marvel. I'm sorry, GI Joe, Transformers, Doctor Who. He was actually a companion character in the comics, and also, I believe Death's Head was in. No, I don't think I can't. I don't want to say off the top of my head that he was in GI Joe comics, but
Hmm.
they had their own crossover. With all the franchises throughout. I mean, it makes sense. Hasbro owns it all, so why not
I
cross
think,
pollinate?
yeah. I think the first The first time I ever bumped into GI Joe was like this animated show, Resolute.
Yeah, or is it Retaliate? Was it?
It was
I
like
remember
early 2000s like ish.
like 2010 because they, they
Hmm.
they launched it around the same time as Transformers Prime.
Yeah,
I think it was Resolute.
that's mainly where I know GI Joe from,
Yeah.
and I don't know, it's surprising to me because you don't. Would you say it's the most popular toy brand? Because okay, Transformers, GI Joe. Is there any other
Lego's
toy brand?
hands down the most popular toy brand in the world. Period. Nothing beats
Yeah,
Lego.
but I don't know. Lego is more like a Minecraft. I would
It's
say
a building
like
toy.
yeah, it's a building toy. It doesn't have a Lego brick doesn't have its own lore. Let's say, while Transformers and GI Joe does. Um,
Well, Transformers, I think, unfortunately, have kind of they need and when we talk about Transformers One,
mhm.
I want to talk about some of my hopes for it, but I don't think that it I have run into kids, like my brother-in-law's one of my brother-in-law's best friends, his son, it was huge on Transformers. He came to the beach with us this year, and he was telling me all about what he liked and what he was excited for. He's very excited for Transformers One, but unfortunately, like toys, they're having a hard time getting them to resonate with kids these days. I think Transformers is still a popular brand, but a lot of brands are in decline in popularity with kids, and it's really hard to figure out what is the most popular toy brand because I think everything comes and goes in waves. Obviously the Marvel stuff had a pretty big following for a while. Now, what I hear kids talking about is like the Roblox and Minecraft toys and things that are based off of the games that they're playing. Um, it's still a popular brand, but it's not where it used to be.
mm, definitely. So should say is here. The weird cycle of creations that were made because of other franchises. We got Super Sentai and Power Rangers.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah, they were both imported. Well, I mean,
Interesting.
Super Sentai wasn't imported, but yeah, there and the Japanese Spider-Man from Toei. It's some good stuff, man.
Nice. Nice. Um, I wanted to ask about the show. It might probably the most popular series out of the Transformers. Could you tell us more about that? How, I don't know, give us the rundown of it, basically.
So, you want me to give you a rundown of like the original Transformers?
Yeah, the '90s show, I think it is,
Well,
and I
it
think a
debuted
movie.
in 1984. So this year is the 40th anniversary of the franchise, and it actually debuted in September of 1984.
Mm.
And the show has a very simple premise. The Autobots, they're fleeing Cybertron. They're um, looking for other sources of energon.
Is that
Cybertron.
when like
Mhm.
the lore started to officially develop, other than just beforehand it was just toys, and now it's just okay,
Well,
let's give them a story.
Bob Budiansky was pretty forward thinking, and not only did he develop the character bios, but he kind of had, I don't want to say he definitely had a series bible, but he had a plan for where the story would go early on. I think a
Hmm.
lot of it they just kind of made it up as they went along because that was during the era where a season of a show was 26 episodes and new episodes would air every single day, and Sunbow Productions was animating them as quickly as they could. It's funny when you look at the total episode count and you realize that the show really effectively only ran for 4 years. Um, but the premise of the show is pretty simple. Autobots are being oppressed by the Decepticons who have control of Cybertron. They're looking for Energon. They get off world. They're followed by the Decepticons. They crash land on. There's a scuffle. They crash land on Earth, and there is effectively both of their ships are destroyed. The Ark and the Nemesis. Um, and basically they fall into stasis. They wake up millions of years later in what was then present day Earth, and you know, essentially they pick up their alt modes so that they can operate in disguise. The whole robots in disguise thing was that they were supposed to be hiding in plain sight, and
So they were like throughout history, Transformers, kind of like
well,
the
in the
second.
original they were just in stasis. They crash landed during prehistoric times, and then when what was
Ah, Dinobots.
Well, that's not how the Dinobots came into play.
Oh, okay.
The Dinobots were an interesting one because they wanted more powerful warriors for the Autobots. So Wheeljack and Ratchet actually built the Dinobots so they could have better odds against the Decepticons, which were bigger, stronger, had the ability to fly, and they also were they'd taken on more imposing alt modes. The Yeah, so like in the original Transformers, they weren't throughout history. They woke up in 1984 when a volcano erupted that was supposed to be at Mount St. Helens, but wasn't. And you know, then funny enough, originally Bumblebee wasn't really meant to be the or didn't start off as like the main God, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Not protagonist, but the character that explains to the audience
Hmm.
what's going on. It was originally Hound. Hound and Spike formed a friendship, and then they switched it over to Bumblebee pretty quickly to make him the kid friendly
So,
character.
so he still had like a voice.
Yes,
Okay.
Bumblebee not having a voice was a relatively new phenomenon, which
Hmm.
also kind of makes me laugh that for the past almost 20 years we've had mute Bumblebee in cinema, and then we get to Transformers 1 and we get the chattiest version of Bumblebee we've had in decades. But yeah, Bumblebee always had a voice. He was voiced by Dan Gilvezan, and Bumblebee acted as the character that would explain the world of the Transformers to the human character. That's why the human character worked so well when they needed to explain why they did things, how things operated. Spike would ask Bumblebee. Bumblebee would explain to Spike, this is why, this is what happens. You know,
The human character's name's Spike and not Sam.
Spike, yeah, Spike Witwicky, but they took the Witwicky name, and then
Oh, interesting.
Spike's dad was Sparkplug. They were both construction workers, and they were the two main human characters. Eventually, they introduced Carly and Chip Chase. Chip
Hmm.
Chase came first, and they basically got involved in the story. They knew the secret of the Transformers, though granted the whole robots in disguise thing didn't last too long before they got a little bit more brazen about revealing themselves to the humans.
Yeah. Um, I have. I know. Would you say 80s were the golden era of Transformers?
Um, it's hard to say. For me, definitely for the toys, the 80s were the golden era. That was when it was
Mhm.
at the height of its popularity, and there was like a mania for it. But back then everything kind of came in waves. Like Transformers were hot from 84 to probably about 87, and I was born in 85, so I got a little bit lucky because I got Hello Hand-Me-Downs.
Mhm.
So I had a pretty big collection as a kid because friends of the family and so my uncle's siblings were uncles that had married in were getting too old for toys, so I got hand-me-downs. But those were the golden era for toys. For shows, I definitely think it was the 90s, especially when we got Beast Wars, and Beast Wars brought Transformers back in a big way. And a lot of the big story beats that they use today originated in Beast Wars. The Sparks, Stasis Lock, um, those were things that originated from Beast Wars. The Great War was another, and really building up those mythos that came from the original G1 series. I mean, it was the cartoon. The '86 movie took itself very seriously, but I think people forget how campy the original cartoon could be at times. The
Mhm.
comics were another story too. The comics were a completely different continuity, and they were much darker. And then you also have the UK comics. You guys got completely different comics than we did.
Hmm.
So
Right. On that note of Transformers getting a lot darker, I do remember someone, I don't know, mentioning it in a YouTube video that their first experience of death was seeing Optimus die
for a lot
in.
of kids, it was.
So could you go into detail of what happened exactly there?
Yeah.
Did he
So
resurrect or what?
well, yeah. So in the 1986 movie, there's the movie sets a tone where Some of the Transformers have made their way back to Cybertron. They have bases on moons. They've started kind of getting grips on their quest to get Energon. Energon's what powers the Transformers. So they've
Mhm.
had an energy crisis, and it's also like, think of it as not only an energy crisis but a food shortage. So they're weakened. The Decepticons have control of Cybertron. So basically Prime is organizing some efforts, and Megatron intercepts the communications, and Megatron, while Prime is off Earth, organizes an attack, takes out a lot of the season 1 cast. Characters that you know and love in the first 10 minutes of the movie are killed. I mean, we're talking Prowl, Brawn, we're talking Ratchet, Ironhide. They are brutally murdered in front of. Well, also too, you get the introduction of Unicron, and Unicron eats a whole planet where there are children robots. So the movie
Yeah.
opens up with death and destruction. But essentially, yeah, some of the core characters are taken out. You're introduced to Hot Rod and Daniel, which is Spike's son. And Hot Rod is a younger Transformer, and Daniel is a little boy, and they have a friendship similar to Spike and Bumblebee. And they want to see the shuttle coming into Cybertron that Prime's talking about in the beginning of the movie, and they see that it's been ambushed by Decepticons. So this big battle breaks out on Autobot City on Earth, and ultimately Prime's called in. I mean, some of the characters are killed off screen, like Wheeljack and Windcharger are killed, and they've introduced new characters in the process. I mean, yes, the whole tactic was to sell kids on new toys. We're going to kill off old legacy characters and introduce Blur and RC.
That always goes well.
Springer,
that always
Ultra
goes
Magnus. Well. Yeah. And granted, they were good characters, but yeah, it just the movie starts off with several gut punches as you're also introduced to new characters. So I think for a lot of people back then, it was hard to adapt to the introduction of new characters when favorites are getting killed off.
I do have a term for that. I call it anti-plot armor, where you really need to kill off a character, and you do it kind of easily so when it was much more difficult for them to be killed in previous media. So yeah.
Then Prime lands on Earth, and there's a showdown between him and Megatron, and Prime just takes on some pretty serious wounds. Again, there's some inconsistency. I love the movie; it's one of my favorite movies of all time. But I can't defend
all of it.
The wounds that Prime gets, because he gets basically hit in his side, and basically Perceptor wasn't a new character. He was introduced in season 2. He transformed into a microscope. He's kind of a scientist medic character. Determines that the wounds are fatal, and Prime dies. But before he dies, he goes to pass on the Matrix of Leadership. And that was the first time you saw the Matrix of Leadership, was in that movie, and it's kind of a MacGuffin. Again, it's an 80s kids movie,
like the Infinity Stones in Marvel, like the
yeah. And the Matrix, you're told, lights their darkest hour. Essentially, it when you open the Matrix, it gives the bearer all the wisdom that it contains, which was from the previous primes, and basically will make you a prime if you're worthy of opening it. So it's a plot device. He hands it to Ultra Magnus, but Rodimus intercepts it, but gives it back to Ultra Magnus. Foreshadows.
Was Prime always a title that was passed down, or was it just Optimus Prime's name?
In that continuity, yes. Prime is a title. And I believe in the cartoon, there were Sentinel Prime. Alpha Trion's the one that rebuilds Orion Pax in season 2 into Optimus Prime. Alpha Trion's like the old sage. His character's similar in Transformers 1 as it was in the G1 cartoon. But yeah, it's a title, but it varies from continuity to continuity what being a prime means. Transformers Animated, it was more like a military rank, and the primes weren't the highest rank, believe it or not. It was Magnus in Transformers Animated.
Okay. No. Everything you're saying is interesting. I wanted to, before we get into Transformers 1, go through some of the movies in between that we got.
Mhm.
and maybe some of the shows. Michael Bay movies. How did they come around? How did this
Uh,
first one start off? Do you know the story
s-
behind it?
I know Steven Spielberg was involved, and there were
Damn.
competing stories.
He was involved
Um,
in Halo as well. He had a
mhm.
bunch of sci-fi movies under his
Yeah,
belt they wanted to do.
yeah. It's been a while since, because I know that was one of the main reasons, like why Lorenzo Di Bonaventura, the producer that they have, um, is able to keep his job. He's a terrible producer, but he's scored a few home runs in his career. Um, Believe it or not, he was also the same producer for Madam Web.
Oh,
Yeah, so
lovely.
he's got an interesting track record. But I recall Steven Spielberg wanted to make it, and they ended up. I know Hasbro wanted to, you know,
Give him that chance.
give him that chance, and it did pay off. The merchandise sales for the 2007 movie were insane. Like, they made a lot of money.
An argument could be made the first Transformer movie was the best, probably. But that's not saying much, to be honest. But
When you
hey,
say the best, you mean like out of all the movies?
out of all the Michael Bay movies, yeah,
Well, I mean, unless you count Travis Knight's Bumblebee movie, I think the Bumblebee movie is the best live action movie.
yeah. But out of
But
like the Michael Bay, the
yeah, out of
Stanley
the
Kubrick
Michael
one's
Bay
the first.
movies, the first Transformers movie is the only one that, in my opinion, has aged well and held up.
Hmm.
'Cause there's so many retcons. I mean, Revenge of the Fallen was made during the writer's strike.
Hmm.
It's really hard to make heads and tails out of what actually happens, how the plot unfolds in that movie. Like,
Yeah,
I can't even tell you why they end up at the Smithsonian,
yeah,
and then of course they get teleported to Egypt, and yeah, it's such a messy
yeah,
movie.
yeah.
Um,
The thing is, I just remember seeing Blackout transform for the first time. All those
yes,
little sound effects, all those little moving parts. It was absolutely fascinating to watch. Like, oh, it's just some army movie, and then all of a sudden you get this huge hulking freaking robot destroying everything. Um,
what takes me out of that scene is how, like, when he's going through their computers, it's like showing everything he's grabbing. Like
uh
that old trope of, like, when you're being hacked, a window pops up saying hacking.
huh. Just to make it
Just
obvious.
so you know, you're being hacked.
Wow, amazing. Um,
It did set a good. I mean, I will give the movie credit. Like,
mhm.
funny enough, when I first saw this 2007 movie, I walked out angry.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. I didn't think that it did Transformers justice at all. Now, I've gone back and separated it as its own thing, but
Hmm.
and the crazy thing is I'd gone through Transformers in name only. Like Beast Wars, I think did it well, where you had characters like Inferno, who
Hmm.
Inferno was a Predacon, but he took the name Inferno. It's established that it takes place well after the G1 series, and it's kind of like two people being named John, kind of in their space, right? Of course, the Megatron in Beast Wars is not the same Megatron from Generation One. He just used Megatron as a namesake.
Hmm.
So I was used to Transformers in name only. Robots in Disguise was its own continuity, and there were characters like Grimlock, and that wasn't a dinosaur; he was a crane. You know,
Mm.
so I had come to accept characters having the name but not being the character. Then we went through the Armada trilogy, so you had Armada, Energon, Cybertron, and same deal. A lot of characters in name only, or they just were keeping the name. Like Wheeljack in that looks like Sideswipe in G1, but he's called Wheeljack. I don't know why. Um, so when I saw the 2007 movie, it bugged me a lot because it's like, well, what are you trying to do? Are you doing these characters in name only, or are you trying to recreate them for the big screen? It felt muddled to me, and I didn't like the humor. I didn't like um, some of the tone. I thought some of the stuff was ridiculous, like Bumblebee peeing on Agent Simmons, and I I didn't like Mute Bumblebee. I understood like why they made him mute, but at the same
Hmm.
time, I was just like, well, wait, in G1, to rewind the conversation a little bit, Spike and Bumblebee's talking help the viewers understand,
Hmm.
but having the
That,
radio voice just
there's an absolute hilarious bit about Bumblebee's voice because uh, we'll fast forward a little bit to last night, right?
Hmm.
Bumblebee speaks magically to Optimus when he's brainwashed, and Optimus is like, Bumblebee, I haven't heard your voice since Cybertron in the
Yeah,
war,
yeah.
and
Oh
he's
no, he
getting
heard it at the end of the first movie.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. I told my brothers this, and they didn't believe me. Like, no, no, you're stupid. This is the first time he's
yeah,
spoken. No, no, I remember this movie.
yeah,
It's so inconsistent, but I don't know. I find it kind of a interesting little feature. You know, all these little droids, and Bumblebee has this kind of permanent disability after the war.
yeah,
It kind of indicates to you that yeah, they've been through a war, and you know, I know that Bumblebee was originally able to talk, but it
yeah.
kind of you can build kind of like a wholesomeness to him when he doesn't have a voice, when he tries to interact maybe with his hands or with his facial expressions, that kind of thing. Um, but they didn't. Again, it was so inconsistent. They forgot that he spoke
Yeah.
um, at the end of it, so they kind of treated it like a nothing burger.
And then at the beginning of Revenge of the Fallen, they're like, oh, because Ratchet fixes his voice at the end of the first one. And then at the beginning of Revenge of the Fallen, they're like, oh, B's voice box is still on the fritz.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
Oh no, I
yeah,
forgot that. Wow.
yeah. Most people do. That, yeah, they had that little thing there. But
Speaking of voices, my understanding, I only learned this like maybe a year or two ago, that Hugo Weaving voiced Megatron
yep,
in the first one, and I was like,
first three.
first three,
Yeah,
damn.
yeah.
I really
He was,
first three
yeah,
movies, him.
yeah. He was Megatron in Transformers: Age of Extinction. I'm sorry, Transformers, um, Revenge of the Fallen, and Dark of the Moon. And then they brought in Frank Welker after Weaving decided he didn't want to do it anymore. He didn't like the fact that his voice wasn't recognizable, and he thought that the movies were stupid.
Mm. Well,
So,
good enough point.
mhm.
But okay, so hang on, who did Frank?
So Frank
Wait,
Welker is the original voice of
yeah,
Megatron.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
yep.
I know that, but in what movie did he come in?
So he came in Age of Extinction, and that
But
one's a little bit.
that's Galvatron. He's a
Well,
different villain, right?
Galvatron was only the name that the humans gave him. So in Age of Extinction, it's funny. Like I think Age of Extinction, Age of Extinction's a mess, but at least I can follow the plot. So essentially,
Mm-hmm.
they took his remains after Dark of the Moon, and they were trying to reverse engineer and make their own Transformers, and the humans were. Um, despite the fact they were also hunting Transformers in that movie. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, well, you're trying to hunt them, but you're also trying to make your own, and then they come up with the weird Transformium thing. But yeah, Galvatron was the name that KSI gave to him. That wasn't the name that he took.
I thought Galvatron was like his like a kind of a different villain.
Well, yeah, it depends
basically.
on the continuity. So in G1, when Unicron reformats Megatron, he reformats him as Galvatron, so he rebuilds his
Oh,
body and everything, and his voice and his personality change a little bit. His personality changes after the end of the movie when he gets basically ejected from Unicron and thrown out into space and falls into the smelting pits.
oh.
He
I'm
becomes
kind of
insane.
disappointed by that because
Yeah,
I thought Galvatron was his own thing, and I remember like my
yeah.
older brother described him. Oh, he's like a more like a bigger threat than Megatron. Basically,
Well,
he's.
you got to remember too the animes that they came out with. So
Mm-hmm.
when you had Robots in Disguise, when Megatron and that got powered up, basically that was kind of like a Super Saiyan form almost, where they would change color and they're powered up. In the states, he went from Megatron to Galvatron, and then throughout Armada, Energon, and Cybertron, when Megatron would power up, he would become Galvatron,
Hmm.
and that was the rationale there.
Okay. Interesting. Um.
So
What about?
give it a pass on continuities.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a. I'm. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. What about Blackout? Was he a?
Blackout originally wasn't a G1 character. But the original G1
No. No. Wait.
Blackout.
I'm mixing it up. Not Blackout. The guy in Age of Extinction that was a mercenary. What was his name?
Oh, Lockdown.
Lockdown.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
So
getting
Lockdown's an interesting one because, funny enough, one, the voice actor was the same guy that did the voice of Bumblebee in the first movie. Remember at the end of the movie, Mark Ryan? Mark Ryan actually did several voices in the Transformers movies. He was Bumblebee. He was Jetfire in Revenge of the Fallen, and then he was also Lockdown. I think he did another voice in the third movie in Dark of the Moon. I can't remember. Lockdown actually surprisingly was one of the most faithful adaptations they did of any character from other fiction to the movies. Lockdown was the fan favorite character from the Transformers animated, and he was voiced by Lance Hendrickson. He had no faction whatsoever. He wasn't an Autobot, wasn't a Decepticon, just a mercenary, and he would basically work for his own motivations, and he loved stealing parts to upgrade himself. So he and Ratchet had a beef in animated, and there's actually a really interesting storyline with RC, Ratchet, and Lockdown. But yeah, he was a character from animated originally.
Interesting. Okay. So the other villains that we have is just Unicron, who I know is just basically the Galactus of the Transformer universe.
Yeah, and last night borrowed the Transformers Prime plotline that a lot of people didn't like, where Earth was Unicron.
Oh.
Yeah. So basically, yeah. But
Whatever. Hey, hang on a minute. Did they? Eternals did that.
Turtles kind of did, but the Celestials.
The Celestials, it's in the Earth. That's kind of
now,
funny.
apparently, the Celestial corpse is going to be how they source adamantium and bring it into that.
Oh, stupid.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other villains. Like, I also remember, like, we're talking about some inconsistencies in the Michael Bay movies. So it was Galvatron in Age of Extinction, and then they completely forgot about it, and it was Megatron
I wouldn't say
again.
they forgot about it. They forgot about the Transformium stuff. But like I said, Galvatron was just the name that the humans gave to him. As far as he was concerned, he was still Megatron, albeit rebuilt.
Yeah, but he didn't seem to have Megatron's memories. Maybe
he still did, and he still was with Barricade came back of all the characters, and somehow Barricade survived getting shot in the head in Dark of the Moon.
Yeah. The thing is, that's funny about these Transformer deaths in these movies. Like when I was a kid, you always have a favorite Transformer, right? Mm-hmm. And I always tried to pick like not the main one, so it can't be Bumblebee. And it can't be Optimus. Those are two obvious choices. All right, I like this Jazz guy. I think he's cool. Oh, no way. He gets ripped in two. Then I think, like, okay, I like Ironhide. Then we skip to Dark on the Moon. He gets shot in the back.
Cosmic Rust, yeah.
Whatever. I didn't know that was a thing. Okay, I like Ratchet. I always like a medic guy. Oh, no, wait, Age of Extinction. I was like, fuck this. Like, what the hell is going on?
They did a lot of those characters dirty. I mean, in fairness, though, like, seeing it, I think a lot of fans are like, oh, well, the new fans get to experience what we did in the 86 movie. Just the fact that they're... And I will commend them on that. As like, those movies make the Fox X-Men movies continuity look stable. But for all the flaws, and there are many that the Bay movies have, the one thing they do have is stakes. There are plenty of characters, human and robot, that don't make it out alive. So
yeah, but we all know Optimus is going to survive.
Even Sam gets killed off screen in the last night because Shia LaBeouf decided to be a crazy person.
He's calmed down now. He's calmed down. Yeah. I forgot to mention something in the Transformer movies. Well, how many of the things were kind of like its own crazy inventions, like the Transformer human in, I want to say it was the second one?
That was an homage to Pretenders. So in the late part of G1 in the comics, and it was never in the cartoon, but they had them. It was so. Like I mentioned earlier, Transformers had 3 big seasons. Full seasons, and then the 4th season was just a miniseries called The Headmasters. It
Hmm.
carried on in Japan. There were several series that continued on, and they had Pretenders, which they were smaller Transformers that could disguise themselves in human suits and look like humans, but the shells would come off, and underneath was a robot that could transform. So the whole concept with Alice being a Pretender, that was something that was,
Hmm.
albeit different in the movie because it was just a Transformer that could turn into a human. That was something that was part of actual
Interesting.
the toy line and the comics and the Japanese series.
That just seemed like a weird Michael Bay invention to me. But hey,
Well, yeah.
what what kind of stuff did, like you said, you hated the first one. What are some of the stuff that really annoyed you out of all the Michael Bay movies?
The cringe factor. I
Okay.
I like Beast Wars is my favorite series, and Beast Wars has a lot of cheese, a lot of
Hmm.
goofiness, but it took itself seriously. Um, the only times, in my opinion, that the Bay movies took themselves seriously was during the action sequences. It
Hmm.
was pretty goofy, and there were a lot of cringe jokes, like especially around Sam's parents. Mojo peeing on, I believe, Ironhide in the first movie. Um, I did not find Sam to really be a likable or relatable character at all. Um,
Hmm.
you know, the fact of the matter is, it's like the core audience, the people that grew up with it were either normies, but the people that were still fans of the franchise were nerds and geeks. And he created a character that doesn't really. He's supposed to be a nerd and geek, but he's got a dad that's driving around, and I believe it was a Porsche. He had a
Hmm.
high end car, and
Did
he's.
right? Didn't he have Megan Fox in the first two movies, and then in the third one we magically replace her and say
Yeah,
nothing
that
about
was
it?
when Megan Fox and Michael Bay had their beef, and I can't even remember the name of. I think it was Rachel something
Hmm.
that replaced Michaela.
Yeah,
I can't remember. I
that.
know the character's name was Carly, which they're trying to do an homage to Spike's girlfriend, later wife. Um, but yeah, they had a bad habit of just doing things off screen and just telling the audience in passing in all five movies.
It's just like they're made for the action sequences, not
Yeah,
necessarily the characters themselves.
yeah. But this the changes, like I really didn't like the fact that it's a movie called Transformers, and it's maybe like 15 minutes of Transformers. Like they
Yep.
really, and I understand budgets and I understand limitations, um, but I wanted to see the Transformers and the humans working in tandem. Not, we're gonna have big sequences with humans and then we're gonna cut to, you know, an action scene here or there.
Yeah.
That was my biggest thing. And then you really didn't get any character development with the Transformers. That
No,
was the
not at
second
all.
biggest problem. Like they made Prime very murdery and aggressive, and I look. I
I'll
don't want
kill
to.
you all, and then
Yeah,
it kills everyone in the forest. Oh, the kid me was so happy to see that, just splitting skulls and
yeah.
everything. That was just
I mean, if
badass.
that's your,
But
your
I
yeah,
understand that's not Prime. He
right.
isn't a cold-blooded murderer, but
Yeah,
nevertheless, it was cool to see him being a badass.
because I mean, they got Peter Cullen back, which was great. You know,
Hmm.
in my opinion, Peter's the definitive Prime. I think that's another reason why people are having issues with Transformers 1 is because, let's face it, this is the first time we get a Prime in a movie. Like, we've had
Hmm.
it in TV shows, but in a movie where Peter's not the voice. And I think for a lot of people, that's jarring. But the return of Peter Cullen after all those years, because I remember, like, Gary Chalk took over the role of Optimus Prime after he was Optimus Primal for the most part. Neil Kaplan did, the dub of Robots in Disguise, but then they brought back Gary Chalk for Armada, for
Hmm.
Energon and Cybertron. And Armada, Energon, and Cybertron, especially Armada, were huge. They were returned to form as far as like resonating with kids because they had mini-cons coming out, and mini-cons were a brilliant idea. They were small 3 packs of Transformers. Every character in Armada came with a secondary little robot. They were simple to transform. They were like micro machines in size, and they could plug into the Transformers and activate a gimmick. And they had really good they had really good success with that. And to derail myself, Gary Chalk, who was Optimus Primal in Beast Wars and Beast Machines, came back and he was voicing Optimus Prime this time in the new continuity. And Armada, Energon, and Cybertron had a lot of episodes between the three. There's also the Transformers Armada video game on PlayStation 2, which a lot of people have, myself included, have very fond memories. And that was like the first good Transformers game that we ever got. Now, I have a guilty pleasure. I like the Beast Wars fighting game on PlayStation specifically. But the Armada game was very good. So for a long time, Gary Chalk was voicing Optimus. So and I loved him as Optimus. I've met Gary Chalk. He's a really nice, kind guy. Really appreciates his fans. I think he gets why Optimus is Optimus. And even though the Armada trilogy is kind of sloppily written, it understood what Optimus was supposed to be. So as I mentioned, that trilogy has a lot of characters that are in name only, but it understood what Optimus and Megatron were supposed to be, and it still had character development, and the Transformers were featured very heavily. So when you get you have all these years of shows, and then you get to a movie that just doesn't get what Transformers is supposed to be and doesn't understand the characters and the fact that they're supposed to have depth and they're supposed to be heroic or villainous or somewhere in between, nuanced, at least explore who these aliens, these giant robot aliens, are supposed to be. And that movie didn't do it. It focused more on dumb jokes and action and, putting a spotlight on Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox. It didn't, accepting it for what it is years later. I've as a a fun popcorn science sci-fi flick, I can stomach it, but as Transformers media, it still just doesn't really resonate with me. And initially I didn't like the designs either, because the action sequences, it's so hard to tell what's actually going on. The Decepticons are all monotone, and with the exception of B and Optimus, B, and Ratchet, they're all same. Jazz is silver, and Ironhide is black. They're hard to see.
I missed it as well. Like, hang on, did he just kill Jazz? Because all the freaking Decepticons are gray.
And so Starscream's design was just
no red in it. Yeah.
Well, not even that, but he looked like a Dorito with arms and legs. I get it. They were going for something different. They wanted alien designs.
Yeah. They still could. Like, Bumblebee proved that you could pull it off with color. Yeah. That's the risk. I mean, you had this everywhere, especially with X-Men. You can't give them colored suits. And there's this kind of mentality of, oh no, but people can't connect with robots. We need to include human beings and human people in order for the audience to connect. Wall-E proves that concept to shame. If you have a good story, the audience will connect to anything. As long as you give it like human-like features and there's a consciousness to it, and you can easily pull it off with Transformers.
And that's what made the original series work so well, is that just as Spike and Sparkplug and all the other humans that were allowed to know the Transformers had a sense of wonder about them, they had a curiosity and a sense of wonder about Earth. The episode Fire in the Sky, where you're introduced to Skyfire, they're seeing snow for the first time. They don't have snow on Cybertron, and some of them love it, some of them are bothered by it, but they get to experience the snow, and they're trying to understand Earth just as the Earthlings are trying to understand them, and it made them relatable in a sense.
No, definitely. And there's so much stuff you could do with the Transformers story. I mean, I was always fascinated by the concept that the Transformers basically lost their planet, Cybertron. And now they're on this Earth, and they're kind of fighting each other. Optimus is trying to protect this planet. Megatron is trying to establish a new planet for the Transformers. Like, you could argue, maybe Megatron is trying to... Yeah, Megatron maybe is trying to kind of, he cares about Transformers, sentient Transformers in general, so he wants to establish a planet for everyone. And Optimus, no, these are sentient beings and stuff like that. It kind of reminds me like a history of Poland. Like, there was one time where you were completely erased from the map as a country, but Polish culture kind of still lived on. and I don't know, during like World War One, we kind of reformed again. So it does kind of remind me of that of losing your homeland and then kind of rebuilding it. I find that concept really interesting. And I think there's a lot you could do with Transformers. And again, as I said, you can easily connect with them.
Yeah.
Wally proves that wrong.
And I'm not a purist in the sense that I want G1 retold over and over and over again. I like that we've had so many different incarnations with different continuities. Transformers Prime was one where they were more or less looking for a new. And funny enough, that's part of the aligned continuity. So even though the designs are very different, what happens in the War and Fall of Cybertron games are actually the prequel companion piece to Transformers Prime. Animated was completely different. Animated, they were just explorers, and they happened to have the Allspark with them, and they crash land on Earth. And Megatron's dormant on Earth himself and a big threat. They're living through a golden age in Cybertron, kind of like what you see in Transformers 1. That was actually the introduction of an antagonist. Sentinel Prime was an animated, even though in that he's not like what he is.
Is Sentinel Prime? Is he meant to be red or blue? After what
Originally, he was yellow. Yeah, but the thing I liked about how he was portrayed in Transformers 1 is he took pieces from the original comics. He took pieces, like he had the same double-handed blade that Sentinel Prime had in Dark of the Moon, and he had a similar color scheme to animated Sentinel Prime, as well as a chin guard. Okay. And the battle mask. The battle mask was introduced for him in animated. So I like that they had different nods to three separate continuities.
And he's always a traitor, I'm guessing.
Not always.
Not always. Okay.
Not always. Yeah, he was not a traitor originally.
Have you heard about? I don't know which one it is, but I kind of really liked it. There's like an anime on Netflix of Transformers, kind of recent-ish.
Yeah, I found it to be kind of boring. I wanted Lethal Lightning loves Beast Wars pretty heavily. I talked to him quite a bit. He was also a Transformers fan. He liked it. I just thought the whole thing was dull.
I don't know. I just like I didn't quite understand all of it because I'm not knowledgeable on Transformers like you. But I really like the concept of this kind of showing like a wartime on Cybertron. It was slow, it was kind of dry, but I like the concept of it.
So super serious. Like, it's funny. I complained about the 2007 movie not taking itself seriously enough, and what drew me out of the Netflix series is they take themselves way too seriously. Everybody's brooding dialogue and monologues left and right.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe they got it from like Dark Horse Comics or something like that. I'm guessing.
I think they just really wanted to make something that they thought, because they call it a Netflix original anime. That's not an anime. Come on, now. It's, Also, the other thing that drew me out of that is like it definitely had budget restraints, and you could tell that you barely ever saw any of them transform on screen.
Oh, okay.
You go back and rewatch it, you'll be like, wait a minute, they couldn't even do one canned animation for each character model, and
no, the idea was good, but maybe a bit. I had the same feeling about Terminator Zero. I thought that was pretty bad. I think Drinker complimented that, but I thought it was like.
I need to watch it for myself because I need to. I just want to. I want to see how it is. I have friends that love it, and then I have friends that hate it. So I kind of want to see where I'm gonna line there. I see Cellshade says preferring Beast Wars, and as I mentioned earlier, that's where I'm at. Beast Wars is my favorite Transformer series, followed by Prime. Prime is so good.
Yeah. What I wanted to mention as well about Terminator Zero, don't know, slight spoiler, but there's like a different AI arguing with this scientist guy.
That's not Skynet?
No, that's not Skynet. And she brings up, well, what if humanity is blood? And they always make war, blah, 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 blah. And the main scientist guy is like, oh, I can't give any arguments. You're right. We are terrible humans. And I'm like, come on. You're one of the smartest scientists ever, and you can't give me a reason why humanity is good, actually. There are plenty of reasons you could give. it it's kind of like that mentality of the characters can only be as smart as the writer is, which is not that smart, to be
Well,
honest. And that's
that's
kind of one of the main reasons why I didn't like it.
one of the things that's tough these days when it comes to modern entertainment is
Hmm.
that so much of it is pessimistic, and it doesn't give the audience any hope
Hmm.
or there's that old it's kind of it's funny, it was a trope for such a long time, life affirming. What is life affirming, right?
Hmm.
And it kind of got tossed in the bucket with things that were kind of campy and corny and meant for a younger audience. But I think that people, audiences in general, like to have their entertaining affirm life, affirm why good should prevail, why we should have a reason to go on, why life is worth living. And I think that that's a common theme in the Transformers series that I like, and that's another reason why I really like Transformers 1, why I love the Bumblebee movie so
Yes,
much.
yes. Because in this scene, it's supposed to be an argument, and I know, like for instance, in Star Trek, like even if you're having an argument, you have to represent both sides like
Nuance.
equally.
Hmm.
It has to be an argument. He can't just mm, give in to this pessimism, basically.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't want to go into XYZ was always woke, but when people say that
mhm.
about Star Trek, I'm like, no, Star Trek would present ideas to an audience,
Yeah,
and it
both
was up to
sides. Yeah.
them to decipher where they landed. It was there to make it was there to inspire thought and conversation, not to be antagonistic about what your viewpoint or potential viewpoint was. And
Mhm.
I think ultimately, inspiring people to feel like they have a greater sense of purpose, a reason to go on, a reason to get up every day and make a difference, inspire hope in people. That's what makes for good entertainment.
Mhm. And it's difficult to do with like Man of Steel, Superman being deconstructed and all that. Deconstruction, it's just a
It's
trend.
tired
I
at this
hope that
point.
comes to die. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Deconstruction and subversion, I think, are just kind of they're unfortunately they're lazy. They're there because I think a lot of writers don't have any original ideas, and like, well, what can we do? Oh, we can deconstruct a hero. We can deconstruct a villain. We can make a villain sympathetic. We can suddenly make the villain the bad guy. And yeah, you're
Mhm.
turning something on its head, but you're not reinventing anything. You're not coming up with anything new. You're not creating anything. Rather, you're destroying. And when you destroy, you're not going to leave anything that your audience is going to want to come back to. And also, too, if you create something that's destructive, your audience isn't going to want to watch it. It's not going to be something that's going to be great for repeat viewing. I don't want to. It's like it's the difference between going to a good restaurant and eating fast food. It's like you eat fast food, you're no longer
You know what you're
hungry.
getting. Yeah.
You know what you're getting. You're no longer hungry, but you're like, I don't know if I want to do that tomorrow. But you eat at a nice restaurant, you get a nice clean meal. You're like, oh man, I can't wait to go back. I can't wait to experience that again.
Hmm.
I don't
Definitely.
know. Maybe that's not the best analogy, but
No, no, no. You're right. Okay, now swiftly moving on to an hour into the show, Transformers One.
yeah.
Some things I wanted to clarify before. So, from what I know, Optimus and Megatron were friends
Depends on the
before the
continuity.
rival.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. In G1 they were not. In G1, Orion
so
Pax was a dock worker,
mhm.
and
Okay,
Megatron.
so they are technically brothers.
Technically, no. It depends on the
Okay.
continuity. So in the Bay movies, it's implied that Megatron was Megatronus Prime, that he was one of the original Primes,
Hmm.
and it's also implied. Well, it's written out in the comics that the Fallen was the original Prime. Um, but again, it really depends on the continuity, which Megatron is which. In G1, the closest thing to D16 would be Dion, which most people speculate was rebuilt into Ultra Magnus, though it's not explicitly said. When you get into the comics, it wasn't until IDW that they really explored the idea of them becoming friends, and then they also did it in the aligned continuity. So in Transformers Animated, they really fleshed out their story that they were friends. That was where Pax was a data clerk, So originally in G1 he's a dock worker.
Oh no, yeah, I've heard this. Like
Yeah.
Optimus was a librarian, and
Yes.
uh, thingy.
Yeah.
I've heard somewhere that Megatron was in the gladiator arenas as
Yes.
well.
So in the IDW comics, he was a gladiator, and they did draw a lot of inspiration um, between Prime and the IDW comics of how he gets his name and everything. Um, but yeah, those were the two series where that I know where they were friends prior to having their fallout. IDW gets a little interesting because in IDW, Megatron ends up becoming an Autobot.
Mm-hmm.
He ends up abandoning the Decepticon cause and becomes an Autobot. And they also, in that, it's interesting, they have a character that looks like Megatronus does in Transformers 1, Tarn, who's the head of the Decepticon Justice Division, or DJD. And he's very, very intimidating. There's things I like about IDW. There's a lot I don't like about IDW, but it did do some interesting stuff.
No, they did that with TMN. Hang on, was TMNT a comic or a toy?
It started out as a comic first. In fact,
Okay.
it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a parody of Daredevil.
Huh.
Because the Foot Clan, hand ninjas, hand foot.
So the hand
Yeah.
was first.
The hand was first. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yes.
I was gonna say IDW did some interesting stuff with TMNT as well, with the Foot
Yeah.
Clan being present throughout history, Shredder being immortal. There's some beautiful graphic novels that my brother owns about Shredder and his look overall.
Well, funny
there's
enough,
some
in the
interesting story
Eastman
with
and Laird
Transformers.
run, Shredder's taken out pretty quick.
Yeah.
He dies in the first issue.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. It was the cartoons. You can thank the cartoon for making Shredder, a prominent and popular character.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And I guess the 1990 movie? Yeah, 1990 was when the first movie came out, I think.
Okay. So we have Megatron, who were they actually minors at any point, or is
No.
that new to
Well,
Transformers?
technically, in the IDW comics, Megatronus, when he wasn't a gladiator,
He was a minor.
Was
Okay.
a minor. Yeah.
Okay. And Optimus was always a librarian.
Well, it depends on the continuity. Data Clerk, he was a dock worker in G1.
mhm.
I don't recall if they established what he did pre-war in the Dreamwave stuff.
I kind of like that because, well, a person who knows his history is kind of. He's kind of. I don't know how to describe Optimus. His kind of optimism, his kind of
Yes.
Captain America-esque attitude.
Right.
Like that makes sense for me to
Right.
for him to be.
freedom,
Yeah, because he studied this.
Yeah.
And
Megatron's motto
Yeah.
for him is "Freedom is the right of all sentient beings." He never says that in G1, but that was part of that character Bible. That's his motto. That's what he believes is the core and the crux of his character.
And it makes so much sense as well because Megatron, he was a gladiator, so he kind of believes power is might, kind of thing. Like I always found those little backstories really fascinating. They do it obviously a little different in Transformers 1.
Yeah.
Which I didn't hate this movie.
Yeah. Are we going
And
into
you didn't
spoiler
either.
territory on it?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
spoil it. I normally I did have, funnily enough, a little spoiler tag somewhere here, but it might cover your fate. Oh no, it's not here. I can put up this, but it was somewhere here. Oh, that maybe I deleted it. But hey, yeah, spoilers, everyone.
Just do like a ticker on the bottom.
Yeah, I had somewhere like a big spoiler. Oh no, wait, there it is.
There you
So
go.
Deadpool and Wolverine. Spoiler alert.
Just
Yeah. Just trim it out.
push it down.
Unfortunately, I can't. Unfortunately, StreamYard doesn't let me crop it or anything, which is just such a shame.
Take it in Photoshop.
Yeah. It was definitely a bit tricky to do overlays in StreamYard. But anyway, I didn't know. When you you messaged me on Discord, right? And said, "Hey, want to watch Transformers 1?" And I'm like, I did say I was gonna watch it, but I
Yes.
just thought back to that first trailer. I was like, Why did I make this promise? Not that I didn't want to talk to you with Transformers. I just
Well,
I always wanted to talk with you about Transformers, but this
yeah,
movie I was kind of dreading. But when I finished, I was like, huh, that wasn't dreadful.
yeah.
I kind of liked it. That wasn't so bad. Um, what were your thoughts?
I loved the movie. It wasn't just that I liked it. I loved the movie. I loved it for several reasons. One, I guess the biggest reason I liked it is because yes, I did watch all three trailers, but I went in completely blind. It had good word of mouth from friends, and I had friends. I have friends in the community that I trust. People like Rodimus Primal, who they pull no punches, and they don't. I have several friends that they like things just because brand is attached, right? I have
Hmm.
those friends, but I also have friends that are
Critical.
critical and actually are critical thinkers, and they don't just because there's a lot of Transformer stuff that I don't like. I mean, outside of the base stuff, I don't like the as I mentioned, the Netflix stuff. The machinima stuff is also really bad.
Hmm.
um, but to stay on track, I went in with low to no expectations. I did, and I went in not knowing what was going to happen. I tried to check my biases at the door because um, so animated and Prime are two of my favorite series, and they have different art styles. When I saw the trailers, as I mentioned, I thought it reminded me that the soft facial features really reminded me of that movie Robots with Ian McGregor and Robin Williams, and I was like, oh, I don't know how I
Hmm.
feel about this art style. Um, they're very chunky, puffy, kind of very kid-friendly looking robots, which is interesting because the movie's rated PG-13. Um, so it's like, well, what's the tone of this movie going to be if it got that rating, but it looks like that? Um, but I found that the characters resonated with me very quickly because they were relatable. You
Yep.
have Pax, who, and I also didn't
It,
know how I was going to feel about the voice acting either.
were those the original names?
So
I
Orion
know
Pax
Optimus.
was, yeah,
Okay.
D16 is actually the designation for the Japanese toy. It's a neat
Okay.
little tongue in cheek because when they released the Walther P38 Megatron in Japan, they weren't called Decepticons in Japan; they were called Destrons, and they weren't Autobots in Japan either. They were called Cybertrons. So you had Destrons and Cybertrons. They were just you had
Hmm.
the Decepticons and the Autobots here, but Destrons and Cybertrons there. So D, you would have a D and a number and a C and a number for each respective one. So D16 was his toy number. Like nowadays, if you buy like a Studio Series figure, it'll have um, um, SS dash, and I think they're in the hundreds. No, they definitely are in the hundreds now. Um, but that was a neat nod to his toy. I mean, he's been different things. He's either been Megatron, or he hasn't had a name, or he's been Megatronus. Um, it all depends on the continuity and how he picked his name, or if he just always had it. So I didn't know how I was going to feel about the origin, but I just wanted to see how it all unfolded because I was like, okay, I had my reservations about animated, I had my reservations about Prime. I just want to go into this with an open mind and no expectations, and I'm glad I did. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about Chris Hemsworth being
Mm.
Pax and Prime, and the trailer, like when he gets to his, I'm trying to do my best Peter Cullen voice, Chris Hemsworth. I was
At
like,
the end of the movie.
yeah, when he goes roll out, and it's very kind of, it plays well in the movie when they get
Hmm.
to that scene, but in the trailers it's kind of cringy.
Hmm.
But to rewind, the movie sets a really good tone in making you understand the motivations of both D16 and Pax,
Hmm.
and it it drip feeds you the characters in a way that works. So you really get to know them and their motivations. You see,
Yeah, they were by far the best two characters in
yep,
this, Megatron and Optimus. Yeah.
yeah. And I loved how even though he was a minor, they homage, they dip into that data clerk thing, the data clerk background for Pax. In this, he's breaking into data archives, trying to
Huh.
help the war effort to help Sentinel Prime locate the Matrix. So in this, the Matrix is also very different. I also, to rewind, I love the fact that they showed Primus in the beginning. They have Alpha Trion narrating it, and they talk about the origin of Transformers. They make this very friendly for newcomers if you're unfamiliar with any of the lore, they set the tone. Like in the beginning, Primus was, a titan, and then he sacrifices himself so he can seed and create life. Which again, you don't have that much life affirming stuff. Someone's sacrificing what they are so that future generations in life can prevail.
Yeah, and once they get to the surface, they kind of look at the grass as well. I noticed that, and
Yeah,
what's this stuff made out of? And kind of
yeah. So that's
organic.
that's that's also an interesting part of the movie too. So they, in this continuity, the Matrix controls the flow of Primus's life force. So basically, Primus picks someone who he deems worthy to have the Matrix that controls the flow of Energon, which is their life force, their food, their source of power, it's all of that. Um, and when the Matrix disappears after the 13 original Primes are thought to all be killed, um, at some point they go under the surface and they're trying to mine for the remaining the residual energon. And so they're all living underground. I thought that was actually an interesting concept, that they have some of the lore where you're, as an audience member, you're left to fill in the blanks. Now, again, I wish that in the case of the T-Cogs, they just had one line of dialogue saying, yeah, after Energon stopped flowing, Cybertronians were born without the ability to transform. Just something like that. It's not explicitly implied, but they rely on you to maybe come up with your own assumptions. I don't like that. I also don't like hitting the nail on the head and having a flashback scene. The movie doesn't do that. But I think in that area, it's a little bit too vague. Same thing with them living under the surface. I mean, it makes sense. It's different in every other piece of continuity. They're on the surface of Cybertron. In this, they're in subterranean cities. But I really did like the visuals with the towers, the skyscrapers
Being
coming
upside down. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I thought that was so cool. Like it gave the movie its own identity, and
Yeah, because Cybertron, it always looks different in
mhm.
several movies. Like, there's never a consistency to it, and
Well,
making it like
there's
kind of like this
some.
dystopia with upside down buildings, I kind
Yeah,
of really like this. Like,
yeah,
Cybertron kind of at its prime, let's say, to have a play on words.
yeah,
Um, no, that was interesting, and the trains making their own roads and kind of thing.
yeah. And I'm
Oh,
curious too. Like, were the Quintessons, were they terraforming the planet? I can't tell. You know,
all right.
because they were on the
The
surface.
opposing faction. What were they?
Well, the Quintessons in other continuity, they're aliens, and in G1 they actually created the Transformers, not Primus.
Oh, Quintessence in
Well,
Last
Quintessa
Night.
was in the Last Night, and she was
Yeah.
kind of her own thing. And Michael Bay, being Michael Bay, didn't explain who she was, what she was, or why she was.
Age of Extinction like teased like they were like actual aliens, but Quintessence actually just looks like a robot
Well,
in the
yeah,
last
it
episode.
was
It's
it.
just stupid. Yeah.
Yeah, she was like a robotic humanoid, and it wasn't really. She was a
So she
servant of
no,
Unicron
there
in
was like
that.
literally an alien hand pressing buttons, creating kind of like
Yeah.
and then they kind of forget that. Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't know what that was supposed to be. If it was supposed to be Quintessa, it's never really explained. And it's funny, in that opening scene, you think that they're setting up the origin of the Dinobots, but they're not.
Hmm.
Yeah, those
It-
movies are just, they're so messy.
it's where I get my initial lore from, so
Yeah,
it's messy. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but to go back to Transformers One, I liked the imagery that they had, and going back to what I liked about the movie, I liked how, again, we were talking earlier about character development. They established that he's very well intentioned. He wants to help the effort to restore Cybertron. He wants to prove that even though he's a minor, he's viewed as a working class. He's lesser than the Transformers, because the Transformers that remain, and they established that 50 cycles have passed since the Matrix disappeared. Now, depending on your continuity, cycles have different units of time. So I can't tell you in this continuity whether 50 cycles is 50 years, because in some it's 50 minutes or close to 50 minutes, so, which is not the case.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Transformers like don't exactly age, but hey.
Well, not they do and they don't. Like, you have some that
Oh,
as they get older, they take on the traits of an older human, but then you also have
there
Transformers
was
that are,
Jetfire as well in the second one. I like
yeah.
Jetfire.
Well, in G1 you had Cup, and Cup and Alpha Trion both had the appearance of older robots, but also you got to remember in G1, even what was considered a younger robot on the Ark, like Bumblebee, had been in stasis for millions of years.
Hmm.
So like in G1, they're all millions of years old.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
You can play around with the ages because
Yeah.
they're robots. Um,
But I like how they established that D16 was very grounded. He just wants to do.
do the
He's like,
work.
yeah, we do the
Yeah.
work. We're here. We are making a difference. We're mining for Energon.
Mhm.
We're the ones that are making it happen. So people can.
Trust in Sentinel.
Yes. Yeah. And they both have the same goal,
Mhm.
but they establish Pax as an action taker. He breaks protocol, but he
Mhm.
does it very well intentioned. And I like how they set that up. I liked how they set up Alita in this. In G1, she wasn't originally Alita 1. She was Ariel, and she was Pax's girlfriend. They were both dock workers, and that was actually his girlfriend. She
Huh.
gets attacked at the same time by Megatron. She's rebuilt into Alita 1. She starts out as Ariel. She's rebuilt into Alita 1. Um, but
I'm not gonna ask how reproduction works amongst Transformers. I'm not gonna ask that.
it varies continuity. Some it's not even explored. In this, it's not explored, thankfully. But
It's a kids movie. Let's keep it
yeah,
PG.
it's a
Yeah.
general audience movie, really. But a lot of people were concerned that Alita was going to be a girl boss, but she's quite literally a girl boss in the sense that she's their supervisor of the mining operation, and she takes her
Mhm.
job far too seriously. So she's not there to undermine them. She's not there. And there are a few lines where she asserts dominance over Pax,
Mhm.
but
At the end of the
I
day, he's the boss. Yeah.
right, and I think it, yeah, that one line where she's like, "Yeah, I'm better than you," it came off
Yeah.
very harsh,
Rolls
and it
the
was a
eyes.
little,
Yeah.
yeah, but it was in keeping with her character. This movie has no messaging whatsoever, so anybody that's
No.
worried about that, this is a very traditional style movie with a very simple story about
Yeah.
friendship, betrayal, and um, you know, waking up to reality.
What I wanted to mention as well, um, from the first trailer, the humor seemed to be so distracting in the trailer
Yeah.
that it kind of literally dragged you out the screen, slapped you across the face, and then put you back into the seat. It wasn't, but watching the movie, the humor wasn't as distracting.
No.
It didn't kind of put you off.
And it's
It
mostly
was,
D.
yeah, it's kind of, I would say soft. It doesn't really distract
Yeah.
from the stakes, or it's not like a MCU humor where you get
Right.
like a super serious scene. Oh no, we went too serious. Quick, let's end it with a joke.
Yeah. And I'm
Kind of
glad that
scene.
they cut one of the lines that's in the trailer where Alita goes, "That's what I'm talking about." And I'm like, "Oh god, how many times is a character going to say that in a movie if it's not
Hmm.
actually in the movie?" Yeah, and the bad Acetron thing that's in the trailers, um
I thought that was gonna be Megatron's voice soon, or something like that. They were teasing that somehow,
no.
but
I mean,
I don't know.
it's just, I liked B in this movie. Yes, he's a little cringy at times, but you
Mhm.
also have to recognize that this version of B has been basically,
Yeah, he's the jokester. He's the
yeah.
Michelangelo of the
Well,
Transformer
he's
movie.
lonely because he was sentenced to work in waste management because he's a chatterbox, and
Hmm.
he's over
He's the underdog.
he's
Yeah,
the underdog, and he's very he's desperately wanting like a connection with other people.
yeah, and he's from some games and from some Bumblebee movie especially. He's very much so inspired by Optimus's optimism, to
Hmm.
play a pun on words, and definitely looks up to him.
Hmm.
And Optimus definitely has a very good influence of him
Yeah.
throughout the progression of the story. No, and it makes sense that they then end up together, and Bumblebee is kind of like the jokester. Um, yeah, but sorry, where were we
So we were,
on
we
the
were
movie?
still going into like things that
Oh yeah,
I
I was
liked and
saying,
worked. Hmm.
yeah, we were saying about the humor.
Yeah.
It's not that bad,
Yeah.
essentially.
And there are some moments that are kind of funny on the surface, like how Starscream gets his voice. It's not only
Yeah.
funny, but it's also played. It's also serious. Um, so in this, the they're well, I don't want to skip ahead too far. I mean, they meet
Hmm.
up with Bumblebee. He's in isolation. He's got a little bit of a MacGuffin. He
Hmm.
unknowingly has recovered a piece of scrap that has a recording from Alpha Trion that
Hmm.
gives Pax a possible location of where the primes might have last been, so he can find the Matrix and bring it
Hmm.
to Sentinel. I guess we also skipped ahead the Icon 5000 sequence. Um,
Which scene was that?
so essentially after they break into the data, well, Pax breaks into the data archive, and D16 helps him escape. They
Hmm.
go back to work, and then there's that whole explosion in the mines where Pax breaks
They
protocol to
rescue
save
Jazz as
Jazz.
well,
Yeah.
who his legs gets torn. I'm sure that's a
Yep.
reference to
Yep.
something. Him getting, does he always get torn in half? Like, geez.
Not always. No. No.
Okay.
That was just kind of a one timer, but still the fact that he went in and he rescues Jazz, he breaks protocol.
Megatron helps as well, so that does
Yeah.
show he's not a complete villain. He still cares for other Transformers at this point.
Yeah. Well, and he still wants Cybertronians to thrive.
Yes,
Um,
that's
you
what I
know.
like about Megatron. That
Mhm.
they don't make him necessarily sympathetic, but they still he's not like a, what shall we say? Um, he's not like a complete evil monster that destroys everything in its path. Kind of like a, what would be a good villain to contrast it? Uh, yeah, let's say Abomination or something, like,
Yeah.
destroys everything in its path and it's evil and kind of like
He's
he
he's a
is.
victim of circumstance, really.
I don't want to call him a victim necessarily, but he's kind of, he wants to build something for Cybertron. He kind of wants to
Yeah.
keep order around, and uh, how he does it doesn't matter. Whether it's by force, whether it's this, like he still wants what's good for Cybertron,
Yeah.
but that completely opposes Optimus's
Yeah.
values, and that's why I think. He, I don't want to say that they make him sympathetic. I want to say that he wants to build Cybertron too. Optimus and him have kind of like similar goals.
Right.
That's
And
interesting.
they just want they want the war effort to end. They want to get back to living their lives. Pax is a little different. He wants to prove that he's more, whereas D16 is just like, look, I just want to thrive. I want to live. I want my
Yeah,
life.
that's the interesting thing, because like Megatron in here is kind of like, I'm keeping my head down,
Yeah.
trust in Sentinel, and Optimus is the rule breaker. When he,
Hmm.
you always
And
kind of picture him as a stickler for rules. Like,
yep.
no, we have rules, we have morals, we need to stick to them. But in here, he's kind of the opposite. It's kind of like an
And they also
interesting
make him a
thing.
little bit of a nerd because he's
Mhm.
fanboying over Megatronus Prime, who was in this continuity the biggest and the strongest of all of the primes, of all the 13 original primes. And
Mhm.
part of their friendship is that Pax gifts him a sticker that
Mhm.
looks like Megatronus's face, which is
Is the
the
Decepticon
Decepticon
logo?
insignia, and he wears it on his shoulder proudly.
Okay, question. What
Mhm.
about the Autobots logo?
Well, they
Was
don't
that in
have
here?
it. They don't have it in this, but in many continuities, it's the face of Primus.
Okay,
So that's the origin of it. Um,
interesting. I don't know. You'd think they do the Autobot logo as well. They did the Decepticon logo.
well, I mean,
Maybe it was cut out or something. Maybe.
yeah, and there's only one toy that even has it. The Bumblebee kids toy right now has the Autobot insignia, but none of the
Really?
others do. Yeah,
None of them. Oh, that's a
none
shame.
yet. I mean, they're going for film accuracy, but
Yeah,
but I
I
mean
mean,
that's
I see people constantly, put like an Autobot sticker on the back of their car. Like those
yeah.
logos definitely have a meaning to them,
They
and
do,
they should definitely use
and
them.
I do like that they do explore the meaning. I guess we'll get to that a little bit later, but
Hmm.
I liked how they have D16 looking up to Megatronus. They go into the Icon 5000, which is a race. Basically, Sentinel gives them a day of R&R, and they
Hmm.
get in as the two miners. Well, D16 doesn't know they're going to crash the race. he thinks he's just going on a little side mission with Pax, and he ends up getting him what he thinks are front row seat. Then boom, nope, we're entering the race. If we can beat just one transformer, we can prove that miners can be more. The sequence plays out. I
Then meets
like.
the eye.
What did you think of
Yeah.
the sequence there?
No, I found it fun. Kind of like, oh, they're friends. He thinks he's doing this for front seats, and it's just like, nope, they're doing in this race. It's definitely is the start of their problems. About how differently, like the same goal, well intentioned, but you know, uh, things go sideways sooner or later. And yeah, and that race was a good way to start it off. And you know they lose.
They
Completely.
almost win though, but they catch
Yeah.
they catch Sentinel Prime's attention, and he's like, "Oh, I'll make sure you take care of." Then
Mhm.
Darkwing,
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Darkwing, who's a transformer and is the boss of Alita, says, "Nope,
Mhm.
I'm sending you to the waste management." They meet B, and then they find what we talked about, and
Yeah.
they go
Something
to the surface.
I wanted to ask because you mentioned about Sentinel Prime.
Mhm.
That in some continuities he's a traitor, and in some not. What was his initial reason for betraying? For his betrayal.
Are you talking about like Dark of the Moon? Because Dark of the Moon was the first. Well, actually, he was an animated, and in animated he was a stickler. He was just kind of a dick in animated, but he never betrayed Optimus. He just wanted to be better than Optimus. He didn't want Optimus to get any positive affirmation from Ultra Magnus, and he just, they were part of a thing called the Elite Guard, which is where he became a Prime. And Prime is Optimus Prime in animated. He's he's a younger character.
Interesting.
Yeah, and funny enough, he's actually voiced by David Kay, who you might know from Ratchet and Clank as Ratchet, but he was in Beast Wars and Beast Machines as Megatron, as well as the Armada trilogy as Megatron. And then he gets to play an Optimus character, which was interesting. But
So there's been quite big changes. So in the Dark of the Moon, he's older,
yeah,
kind of like looked up to, and in other ones, he's younger, kind of like a rival to Prime,
yeah.
kind of thing.
Dark of the Moon, his ambition, and again, that story's so muddled. What I took from it was that he betrayed because they knew that Cybertron was depleted of resources, and their whole goal was to, well, we'll go to another planet, we'll have slave labor, and we'll make a new home planet, and that was his reason for betraying, because he knew Optimus would never go along with it.
And in here, it's kind of he makes a deal with the alien life forms.
Yeah, here it's actually interesting because you find out he was never a Prime. He assumed the identity. He had made a deal with the Quintessons, thinking that he would just be able to get the Matrix of Leadership. He could control the flow of Energon. He could live like a king. He'd be unopposed as the only Prime. So he makes a deal for the Quintessons to kill the Primes, take the Matrix himself, assume the role of a Prime, come back and be like, oh, this is a tragedy. But he didn't realize that Primus has to choose the Matrix bearer. So
it's Mjolnir, basically.
Yeah, so he ends up screwing everyone over because the flow of Energon stops. They have to move underground, mine for Energon, but he still assumes the role of a leader. And what the Cybertronians don't know is that most of the Energon they're mining for is going to the Quintessons because he's shipping it off-world. And so after they get to the surface, after the train sequence, they meet Alpha Trion, who's under rubble but not dead. And Alpha Trion spells it out for them that no, they just didn't start being born without T-Cogs. He had them removed from every Cybertronian before they were even born. And, well, except for the established Transformers. And the Energon they were mining for wasn't even being used for them. And that breaks D16.
Yep. Because he, looked up to, trusted Prime, and, that betrayal.
That, and Sentinel killed his hero, Megatronus.
That too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that feeling of he was completely trusting towards Sentinel.
Yeah.
And that kind of feeling of betrayal, that his hatred, kind of like Anakin. He let that. yeah, that he let hatred walk in through the door and have his way with him. It would be a way of saying it. Um, he let himself like completely fall into it and dictate his kind of actions. And I liked that, because it was kind of, like a little pile of snow rolling down a hill, and slowly getting bigger.
Because
The thing
he's
I didn't buy is when he lets go of Optimus's hand
at
when he
the
was
end.
dangling on the cliff. I didn't buy that. I'm like,
I did
I think
because
that's you need a little more for him to let go.
yeah. Well, because the last words that Pax says
Yeah,
was no, and that was
yeah. Maybe if like Sentinel was getting away, and he's so focused on him that he lets go of Prime, something like that. Because I don't
yeah.
think, to me, that was a bit cliche. Oh, now he has red eyes. Okay, now he's full on evil. I think there needs to be kind of a
Well,
more softer transition.
I bought it because he was losing himself. Like there's the scene
Hmm.
again, like he breaks and he sees that the guy that he thought was leading them to, you know, salvation almost. You know, Sentinel kept saying, well, we're getting close. Keep going to the surface," only to find out all the labor, all the effort that they've been risking their lives for was for naught. Then, you know, seeing that he killed his hero, he killed the character that he looked up to, that he had kind of, you know, fanboyed out about for years. He killed him for nothing, um, other than to sell out his own people. You know, and you know, D is a very grounded character, but when he gets the ability to transform and starts coming into his own, I mean, he's the only one of the four that gets an aggressive alt mode. I mean, he becomes a tank.
Yeah, and the Prime said use these transformations
Right.
however you want.
Yeah, and
So
that's the thing is
he
they
gives
get their
carte blanche,
cogs.
basically.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
special because Tryon gives them the cogs from the fallen primes, so they
Hmm.
all get very special transformation cogs, and well, you know what happens to Megatronus's D6 or Megatronus's
Hmm.
transformation cog is interesting, but you see, I can't remember who got which prime's cog because I've only seen the movie once and I haven't. I was just watching and didn't catch.
Oh yeah, because Sentinel has Megatronus's
Yeah, he
cog,
took it
and
as
he
a
steals that.
souvenir,
Yeah.
and also to power himself up.
And yeah, his shouting about how he wants to kill him, his initial shout,
Yeah,
like you could hear a pin drop there. It was just like, "Oh, this is a nice kids movie," and then he just says that, and it's just like, "Oh,
yeah, because he realizes
that
his whole life was
I
a
really like
lie.
that scene." Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I love that scene, and you know, I also like when they realize that Tryon is being ambushed, and you know he's like, "Go, I'll take care of this." He gives them room to escape, and as they're in that escape sequence, and he starts coming into his power again, they have so Alpha Tryon gives them a recording that they can take back to Iacon to show what Sentinel's actually been doing, um, and you know, part of the development, the character development for D16 becoming Megatron is he loves Pax. That's his best friend. But at the same
Mhm.
time, he's been grounded. He's been responsible. He's been trying to do the right thing. And Pax has been brash, reckless.
Always getting him into trouble.
Yeah, always getting him into trouble. So that scene where he takes the recording and he's like, "I got it," and he's being stern because he's starting to realize
Mhm.
I have power now. I've been lied to. I'm frustrated, but I have power.
Yeah. I'm not gonna let you steer the wheel this time because you always get me in trouble. I
Right.
trust this more so in my hands,
Right. And their
kind of
mission
thing.
was to get back to Iacon.
Hmm.
And then, of course, they get ambushed by the Cybertronian Guard, who know what Sentinel's up to. And they have, it's led by Starscream, which I liked how Starscream starts out as a leader here.
No, I can't say I'm a fan. I was like, hang on, this is Shockwave. These are
Shockwave and
Decepticons,
Soundwave.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell are these guys doing here?
But they
You'd
weren't
think that
Decepticons
Megatron would be
yet.
the first. Yeah, they weren't, but you'd
But
think.
in other continuities,
Megatron would build this band, not that they were already a band and Megatron just joined in.
well, I'm cool with that because in other continuities like the Aligned continuity, Starscream started out with no factions. In War for Cybertron, he was the air commander, and he ends up he has no choice to be recruited by Megatron. Megatron flexes force over him. So I like this twist on it where he's, basically
Comes in and declares himself king, basically.
yeah. And when I first heard the voice, like I was like, when I heard Steve Buscemi was cast as Starscream, I was like, oh, he'll make a great Starscream. And then you hear his voice, and you're like, he doesn't sound right. But then they have the scene where,
He
essentially,
yeah.
yeah, they don't trust them because they're from underground, and they've been banished to the surface, but they know Sentinel's intentions, and they're basically like, no, give us the information, and then we're going to give you it's like either you don't give us the information and you're going to suffer and die, or you give us the information, we make it quick and painless. And D16 isn't having it. And that scene where he's just like walking away, and he's like, no, I have a mission, and Starscream's like, no, what are you doing? And then they get into that fight. And it ends with him choking him to crush his voice box, and then he gets that iconic Starscream voice. I love that so much.
Yeah, power corrupts always, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
when Optimus is, interestingly enough, handed power, he kind of stays the same, relatively enough.
Well, he matures. It's so interesting how the power dynamics are different between the two in the movie. Like, D16 is somebody that never. Again, he was very confined in a box, and then as he starts getting power, he realizes very quickly that he can assert himself to get what he wants. Whereas Pax never really changes in that sense. He's, he has a mission, but he doesn't want. He'd rather negotiate with people to have them see his side than assert himself over them.
Yeah, and he did have a line in there somewhere when the truth is revealed. I think he says, "I knew it," or something like that. That he had his suspicions about Sentinel Prime, whereas Megatron, D16, had like complete trust in Sentinel, and that feeling of betrayal is what even turns him. And Prime kind of had these kind of inklings that maybe stuff wasn't. Stuff wasn't being honest in here. Things didn't add up because he looked through those archives.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's also, I think, has a lot to play in how these characters react to the truth and how it kind of shapes them.
The confrontation with D16 and Sentinel, and you start seeing the brutality of Sentinel. And I think the reason I bought him letting Pax go more than anything was the scene where he's torturing him basically, and he keeps standing up. He refuses to kneel before him, and he keeps standing up in defiance.
I found that kind of a positive aspect to him, necessarily, like always standing up, even no matter how much they knock you down, kind of thing. Like some that tribute.
Well, it got his character.
Yeah. I would imagine that was what Megatron was like in the arena pits as a gladiator.
Never gave up.
Yeah,
and
like an admirable aspect to Megatron.
And the line where Sentinel's like, he notices the decal on his shoulder and takes it, and he puts it on his chest. And he's like, "Oh, big fan, huh?" And he puts it on his chest. He's like, "Well, we'll see that never comes off." And he takes the welder and starts carving Megatronus's face into his chest. And then he reveals that he's got his transformation cog. He's like, "Yeah, I took this for myself, the biggest and baddest of all the primes, and now I have his power." And I think that further broke D.
Yeah, and he literally stamps it on his Decepticon friends and himself as well.
Yeah,
that's how much
in the post credit scene. He still likes what Megatronus stood for, and I like that because they play that. I hope this gets a sequel. There's a lot that can be played into that.
Transformers 2?
Your Transformers 2, man. But I mean, they, if you think about it, they could play that into a sequel where, again, Pax, or now Prime, is someone that negotiates. He wants to negotiate and work through things. He's still, even though he banishes Megatron at the end, he's like, "Look, you you don't stand for what I stand for. You have to leave Iacon. He still has some common ground and understanding of who he is. They were friends, and he knows that that's not what Megatronus Prime would have stood for. But that the one thing that bothered me about the end though was, they're playing it up where B starts coming into his powers. It's like, I got knife hands, and he's slicing up different drones and characters, and he's killing them. And then you get to like, wait a minute, we don't do executions here. And I'm like, wait, but you were just
wait a minute,
just cheering
yeah.
on B there.
I was wondering, like, is he gonna lose his voice or not? Especially when they sellotape his voice, his mouth.
I think that was just kind of a joke, like
a little nudge to it. Because I don't know, I kind of like, him being very talkative and then him kind of losing his voice throughout the war. But that would probably come much later on, not in a Transformers 1 movie.
Well, I don't think they'll go back to that. I think they've realized that for the most part, having the character talk, because I mean, since the Michael Bay movies and the Bumblebee movie, we've had. So we had Transformers Prime. At the end of Transformers Prime, Bumblebee gets his voice back permanently. Then there was the second Robots in Disguise series from, I believe, I think it kicked off in either 2013 or 2014. He could talk there. And then they had Cyberverse Adventures. Bumblebee could talk, all in that. Then there was Earthspark. He could talk. He could talk all throughout the War for Cybertron trilogy. So I think the Mute Bumblebee is a thing of the past at this point.
I like it. Well,
I mean, that was your introduction to Transformers. So for
true.
That's the norm. And then like when I was younger, it was funny because as much as I love Beast Wars, I remember people were begging for them to go back to vehicle modes, like during the Beast era, like begging for them to go back to vehicles. So it's just interesting how norms are for people, and the stuff that you grow up with, you're nostalgic for. But then as you get older and age gaps stop being a barrier for having conversations, like, I've got nearly 20 years on you, but I can see the positives and negatives of every continuity, and there's things about each that I like and things about each, even G1, that I dislike. But I also can recognize that when you have a series, just like with Marvel, there's so many variants. It's not all 616.
I just recently learned that Batman wasn't trained by Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah, I saw that tweet. Yeah.
There's that kind of stuff that, because I grew up somewhere where we really didn't have comics, so all I had was movies, and throughout time I picked up on all the extra lore. So it's interesting. I guess the same with Transformers, like you get your stuff from all the animated movies. But no, carrying on to Transformers 1, you mentioned in DMs that you really liked the voice actor for D16.
I did.
What's his name?
It's Brian Tyree Henry, and he's been in a lot of stuff. It's funny, we were talking about Eternals before this one. He was Phastos in that.
Yeah, he was in Bug's favorite movie, Bullet Train, as well.
Yeah, he's Miles' dad in Spider-Verse. He was he did another voice role that I really liked him in, and I'm struggling. Oh, it's like on the tip of my tongue.
I mean, he's been appearing in a lot of things, to be honest, recently, and I don't particularly mind.
He got big off of Atlanta, but
what's that?
It's a kind of a show. It's a show in the I think it was on FX.
Huh. I haven't heard of it.
But what was it that he was in? It's bugging me that I can't remember what it was that he was in that I liked him in. But
remember in the trailer, like, we found the voices like really jarring, especially for Megatron. It just seemed really bizarre to have this kind of young, hip, energetic kind of voice to Megatron, but When you walk out the movie, you're like, actually, he did a
Well,
pretty good job.
I wouldn't even say it was hip because he was, like I said, he was kind of nerdy in the movie. Like he's doing the stuff like in the trailer where he's acting like kind of cocky, like punching Pax, in place of Dreadwing.
Hmm.
But that's not really what it's not representative of his character, and that's I think the problem with the trailer.
Hmm.
He's very grounded. I don't want to say he's dry, but he's like somebody that cares, but he's got a sense of purpose, and you can hear it in his voice. And I did like that both Hemsworth and him, as the movie went along, their voices evolved at different points. Like again, it starts out with Pax being very carefree, optimistic, having his sense of purpose, but there's a playful tone in his voice, whereas D's very grounded and trying to do right by his friend and very very reassuring, but also like cautious, and you can hear that in his voice. Then you get to like where they learn the truth, and Pax is a lot of that carefree nature in his voice starts to disappear, but the optimism is still there. And I see like even Jonathan D in the chat says, I like that they made sure to even have that line about his optimism,
Hmm.
alluding to the name that he would get. But
Is that how his name formed? Like Optimus, like Optimus.
I think when Bob Budiansky named him, it probably was part of it. Like I want to have optimism in there.
Nice.
But towards the end of the movie, when he's all in on just, he's like, no, we need to be aggressive. We need to be a bit authoritarian in the way that we course correct, Sentinel's failings. He sounds like Megatron. Like
Hmm.
he goes from sounding
And
like,
he's riling the people up as well. Yeah.
yeah, like that. He becomes so, I don't want to say self-assured, but he becomes so aggressive in his tone, very commanding.
Hmm.
I bought him as Megatron.
Definitely.
And
No, definitely. You bought it. It didn't it didn't feel random. It didn't feel jarring. It completely felt like the emotion that
Yeah.
he was feeling, like it was
Yeah.
genuine.
And so to get back to like why he lets go of Pax, I,
Hmm.
I I bought it because, again, he's been betrayed, he's been lied to, he has his blinders on that he needs to kill Sentinel. He
Hmm.
cannot be denied of the
Hmm.
guy that ruined
Yeah,
his life.
that I agree. But
You
he
know,
doesn't have to kill Optimus to do it.
but the thing is that he's sad, but he's also pissed off because he doesn't view it that his blind rage got his landed a fatal wound on his best friend. He shifts, and you see like through his face that he'd rather be angry at the situation than sad and coming to his senses. He should be mad at himself, but he switches that anger over to Pax, and he knows that if he pulled Pax up, even though Pax was more or less fatally wounded, that he would probably deny him from doing what he wanted in killing Sentinel. But I
Hmm.
think ultimately, the thing that he's going to learn is that killing Sentinel doesn't undo what happened to him at all. Which I think is, again, like I do kind of have issue with Pax being like, you go B, kill all those guys, but we can't do an execution here. But Sentinel
Mm.
did represent a lot, and I think that I think deep down D16 also knew that if Sentinel was allowed to live,
Hmm.
he was a master manipulator. Who's to say that maybe Pax was wrong and maybe Sentinel would have been able to talk or negotiate his way out of consequence.
Yeah.
You know,
I still feel like there could have been a better way to do
I think
it.
it just
Maybe.
needed two more lines of dialogue. Like,
Maybe.
and I think
Um,
that's my biggest
like.
gripe with the movie is that I wish that there was just a few more lines of dialogue peppered in.
Mhm. I think it would have been good to like maybe he's about to land a killing blow on Sentinel. Optimus jumps in the way,
But that's what happened. He was about
have
to use this fusion cannon, and not
so,
only did Pax cut it in half. Well, no, Pax cuts it in half after he becomes Prime, but
mhm,
he is about to put that killing blow on
on
Sentinel with
Sentinel.
his. Yeah, because that blow blows off Pax's arm and half of his chest.
Yeah. So okay. So let's just say he didn't catch him at all.
Yeah.
He tries to catch him, doesn't. Optimus falls off, and then he turns to Sentinel, and instead of blaming himself for having accidentally killed Optimus, he blames it on Sentinel Prime. This is your fault. He can never put the blame on himself. Like he can never like pause to reflect on his own actions, but instead
I
is
think that might have
zeroing in
worked
on
too.
Sentinel. I think that would have been
And
better.
then as Pax comes back and he sees that the Matrix chose him to be a Prime.
Hmm.
But I think that they wanted it to play out that way because if he comes back as Optimus Prime and then banishes him as Megatron, like, oh, we're better than executions. You need to leave Iacon. It would probably have played off like, Prime was kind of a dick.
Um, I wouldn't
But
mind that to be honest, because
well,
he got him killed.
I just also kind of like the fact that you needed him to become a little bit of a monster. You needed what was once, a guy that had his best friend's back, completely losing himself. You needed to have him lose himself. I just like then and there. I wish that there was one line. Maybe if he was just he's like why are you doing? He's like that whole line. I can't keep saving you. Is I believe what he says to him. I wish that there was just like one line that Pax had, and one line that he D16 had, just to completely cement why he lost himself.
Yeah. No. Overall, I would give this like a solid 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I lean more towards like an 8, maybe an 8.5.
Oh, that's pretty high.
Yeah, I again like my biggest complaint about the movie is again I wish that there was some sort of dialogue about why they sold the Cybertronians on the lie about the T-Cogs. I wish
Hmm.
that there was maybe a line to say like what the Quintessons were doing, or because again Sentinel wasn't a Prime, he assumes the role of one. Like at least have Alpha Trion explain a little bit more, not a flashback. I love explanations. One, because movies are getting too big in budget, and also two, you don't need to show everything. I love having things left in my imagination. And this movie did get my gears turning because I'm trying to fill in the blanks on some stuff, but it's not like there were explicit plot holes all over the place either. I just kind of wish that there were a couple more lines of dialogue to seed imagination, and also as an audience member just to explain things a little bit better. So that's my major gripe. And I did think that they, again, for the most part, I was fine with the humor. I thought it worked. I wish that they had downplayed the bad Acetron stuff a little bit because it did become a little bit of a dead horse, even though the other characters are like,
We're both agreed that the marketing guy needs to be fired. Whoever made this
yeah,
trailer.
well, that's that. Looking at the movie as a whole, that's not a problem with the movie. I view trailers and movies being separate entities. The trailer is a problem. I hope that word of mouth takes off for this movie. That's been the case with a lot of animated movies. Tyree Henry was also in Across the Spider-Verse, and that was a movie that took off after word of mouth. We're seeing it more and more where people are vetting movies. Like Inside Out 2 went from having a very disappointing opening weekend to being the top 10 grossing movie of all time.
I've seen it, and it's like, it's okay, but I felt like the human stakes were bigger in the first one.
Yeah, I
Like the
think
human
it's just,
story felt
yeah.
smaller in Inside Out 2. I find Inside Out 2 interesting because it's like a story within a story kind of thing. Kind of like in Transformers, and say like there's a human story and there's a
Right.
robot story, but it's never the
They're
humans
not,
do that
they're not
overshadowing.
tied together.
Yeah.
It's just like they're pulling the strings, but they're separate.
Yep.
But as this movie, I hope just as you saw Transformers 2007 and became a fan, I hope that this brings in a new generation of fans because the things that we love, the things that are huge parts of of pop culture for us that they need to have good new content in order to thrive and move forward. Otherwise they go dormant. And I hope that younger audiences see this because one, I think it's a good story, and I think it's setting a good foundation for things to come. And it's just even if not Transform, after the movie was done, my wife said that was my favorite Transformers. She's seen most of them because of me, but just like I think that was my favorite Transformers movie, period. And I was like, oh really? I was expecting to not like it as much as Bumblebee, and I like it better than Bumblebee. And
Really?
yeah,
Oh.
I did. I really did. Um, and I still think Bumblebee's a great movie. But I just really hope that this takes off because I liked this direction. I liked the fact that it was a simple story. It had no messaging in it other than there's reasons to live. There's more. There's purpose. You can find
Hmm.
purpose. Don't let people give you false hope. Go out and also the message that Pax has, that he just wants to show that he can be something greater. And I feel like so many people, like we have, if you were to take anything like that's vaguely messaging in that movie,
Hmm.
in our lives, a lot of people are given excuses as to like why they can't do something, a victim complex, or
Yeah.
I have I have this, that, or the other, and it prevents me from doing this and this. They're all disabled. They don't have their TCOGs, and most people think, oh
Yeah.
well, we're a servant class because we don't have TCOGs. We're lesser than, and we have to accept it, and that's what we are. They live by an excuse, and Pax wouldn't take that. He knew, even though he didn't have a TCOG, he knew deep down in his spark that he was just as good as anybody else, and he wanted to prove that. And I think that's a good affirmation that younger audiences can take.
Hmm.
You know?
That just reminds me because the town that I live in England, I've basically lived here most of my life, and people around me are just kind of lifeless. They kind of constantly look down. They don't really have any ambitions.
Yeah.
They on Fridays and weekends they just go out drinking nightclubs or whatever. There's nothing about them that they want to kind of grab life by the horns. And I think that's kind of like you said, the nice message
Mm-hmm.
in here to kind of it motivates you to kind of look up, to kind of aim
Yeah.
for something, to kind of even though you're a miner without a cog, to still kind of push forward. I think that's a lot of people need to hear that.
It was like,
Definitely.
growing up with this guy, right? Freedom is the right of all sentient beings.
Mhm.
This is a character that in the 1986 Transformers movie. Have you ever seen it?
19.
The first animated movie. You've seen it, right?
No, no.
Okay, it's on YouTube. I'll send you a link after this so you can
Okay.
watch it in full. It's 90 minutes. It's 80s cheese, but there's a scene in that fight with Megatron and Optimus. And again, in that movie, Megatron has killed so many of his friends, so many of the original core cast, and Prime has him dead to rights, gun to him, and he still won't kill him.
Hmm.
And he's begging Prime for mercy, and he says, "You who are without mercy now plead for it. I thought you were made of sterner stuff." Before, well, I won't spoil it for you, but this is a guy that wouldn't. He could have just executed Megatron in the moment and called it a day. But
Michael Bay Prime.
yeah, no, it was the opposite. Maybe Bay saw it and was like, no, if I did this, he would have killed him.
Oh no, wait! He randomly kills him in Dark of the Moon.
He
Like,
doesn't randomly kill him in Dark of the Moon. Megatron realizes the error of his ways, and he just goes, nope, and takes an axe to his head, and then pulls the axe so hard out, it takes his spine with it. He does a Mortal Kombat fatality on him.
and in here it's just like, maybe I'll spare you, kind of.
Yeah.
Oh,
But,
that's hilarious. The contrast there.
yeah, you had a character that was a bit, he lived and died by his morals, quite literally. The fact that even his greatest enemy, he was not going to indiscriminately kill. He would rather capture someone than and in fact, all the Decepticons that he fights in Autobot City, not a one does he kill. Some of them get injured pretty bad, but not a one does he kill. And the original Prime was someone that valued life and diplomacy, and just was, I think, it's silly to think a 80s cartoon about robots that transform into vehicles or everyday objects. Um, he instilled a lot of positive affirmation on a lot of kids, myself included, and I think that's what we need for the franchise. But it's also something we need in entertainment. It's just sorely missed. And what you're talking about, like people not having a sense of purpose, I think our entertainment needs to be a reflection. And I'm not saying go out and get the latest Kevin Sorbo Jesus film, but just having good entertainment that resonates with everybody, but also has positive messages and affirmation. Like, your life is worth living. There are good people out there. You should form friendships. You should be greater than the sum of your parts. Those sort of messages. Yeah, the media is not responsible for people coming to that conclusion themselves, but man, it's been solely missed in our society.
Yep, completely agreed. I think that's a good note to finish off on. Zero, would you like to promote anything before we finish off the show?
I've got my link tree out there. I've relaunched my old YouTube channel.
I've put it in the description.
Awesome. Appreciate you. Nice. So I'm going to be putting, hopefully I'll have it up either tomorrow or Sunday here on the East Coast. I'm going to a signing tomorrow with Daniel Warren Johnson. He is the artist and writer of the Skybound Transformers comic book. And if you haven't read it, it is so good. It is really, really good. So I'm excited to meet him and hopefully get a couple signed copies. I'm going to get at least one, but I want to get a second signed copy to gift to someone. And I'm excited about that. So I want to put together a vlog style video where I go and maybe I hopefully he'll give me a few minutes of his time, because I have a few questions I want to ask. But we'll see how that turns out. At least I'll do a video talking about my experience. And then I've decided that on Tuesdays, I'm going to launch a Transformers news show on my channel called 0 Hour. And I think October 1st is going to be my first show. I'll just be going over news and what's going on in the official space, in the third-party space, and, kind of keep it to an hour. I love having people from the community come in too. So if you're interested, I will have an interactive chat, and I'll be talking to anybody that wants to tune in for that. And then, of course, if you're into video games, I do Gronking on Dogs with Lethal Lightning and Mazza, and I am on the Sunday shows. It's their Monday, but I come on the Sunday shows. So 6 o'clock Eastern in the U.S. On the East Coast. So if you're interested in anything video game related, we do a really good show over there, and we highlight a lot of good games that nobody's talking about, in addition to covering regular gaming news. We have a section at the end of every episode to get a game on your radar that you might not have heard about. Also, they're doing a lot of good content over there, Let's Plays. And I also, in my link tray, I have Mazza's channel, because I am now Mazza's editor. So I'm doing meme videos for his Let's Plays, and he's got one coming out for Apex, his return to Apex Legends. We put something together that's really funny and really entertaining. I think everybody's going to like it. And also give me a follow over on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I'm approaching 1,000 followers over there, so I'd really appreciate it if you could help me hit that goal.
I got it first. Yeah,
you did. You beat me to it.
I don't know how on earth I got to it. But hey,
do you still have your blue check?
I don't have a blue check.
Okay, well then, yeah, you've just been putting in the grind.
Yeah, basically. Honestly, I don't know if it's worth it. It's probably worth buying on PC more so than, I know it's more expensive on iPhone, that I know for sure. Don't really need a need for it unless I want to get monetized, but I don't think I meet the requirements for it, even though I have 1,000. But yeah, no, you'll hit it soon as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I'm not pressed on the count. I just I just appreciate that anybody follows me. Period. So
yeah, me too. I don't know why they would, but yeah. As for me, you guys have probably noticed I have not uploaded anything in a month. Time flies when life and shenanigans is going on. I have all sorts of stuff going on in my life, like my church community, job, and I've recently picked up postgraduate creative writing at uni.
Nice.
I've started to go back to uni too, and I'm trying to get a little something published. I've been sending it out to agents, a kind of graphic novel of sorts. Well, a script for it anyway. I'm hoping my brother will illustrate it. He drew this little Darth Maul. Love my brother's art. He's absolutely fantastic. So hopefully, so far I've sent a couple of query letters that at least it's getting rejected. You know, I have
They're
got
looking
like
at it at least.
yeah, they are looking at it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna probably get 1,000 no's, but all I need is one yes. And yeah, maybe I'll have something to shill on other podcasts rather than just
You
meme
might
videos.
you might also be able to go the Indiegogo route too.
Uh,
It worked for Jason Sandberg.
maybe, but the thing is, I
You should
I
talk
want
to
to get
Jason too.
yeah. The thing is, I because my brother's a busy guy, um, and I kind of want to guarantee him that even when he once he draws the panels, that is gonna get published. That it has the agent, it will get published. It won't just sit on the shelf. I know with like Comicsgate and Indiegogo and stuff like that, stuff never gets delivered. Sometimes you wait days on
Yeah, you
end,
don't
as
want to
the Drotic
disappoint the
said.
people that are supporting
Exactly.
you. Yeah.
I don't want to disappoint Matt as well. I don't want his art just to sit on a shelf
Or hard drive.
and collect dust, or
Yeah.
a hard no, on a shelf because it's
Oh.
all hand drawn. He doesn't use
Oh,
he
okay.
doesn't use any electrical thing. So yeah, I would really like to make something and hopefully I'll have something for you guys. Hopefully that's the dream, to get published. As for content on the YouTube channel, I will have one meme video before the end of the year. I do have an idea of what I want to make. There's also a analysis video I'm writing the script for. I want it to be kind of highly detailed. It's going to be a analysis of Spider-Man 3, which I watched the re-release of, and it's going to be titled "Is Spider-Man 3 Really That Bad?" It's an interesting little retrospective because that movie came out 2009, so kind of close to Transformers,
Yeah.
which is funny to think about.
It came out the same year as the second Transformers movie.
Which is just crazy to think about.
Mhm.
Time flies.
Yeah, it
But
does.
yeah, that's all the stuff that I have going on. So I do apologize that I'm not publishing. Thank you guys for subscribing anyway. I've been growing the channel a little bit, even though I'm not publishing anything. Oh damn! Did I miss it? Yeah, yes, you did, Epic Mike. It is 2 a.m. for me in the UK here. But no, if you'd like, you can watch back a bit of the stream. We were reviewing
Good to
Transformers
see you,
1.
Mike.
Yeah, well, much. Thanks for showing up in the chat, mate, even though it is in the last minutes. But anyway, I'm working on getting this script published into a graphic novel, so hopefully I get something out of it. And yeah, content soon on the channel. I don't know how soon. I won't give specific dates because, you know, editing, life, it's all chaotic for me at the moment. But anyway, thank you everyone so much for watching. I will see you guys. Actually, I'll probably see you guys on the Joker 2 live stream. I'll be reviewing that. That's one of the movies that I've been very much so looking forward to. And I'll probably be reviewing it with a much bigger panel of some friends. All right. I'll see you guys then. Goodbye.